This is part 2 of our special investigative series on Ghislaine Maxwell, from the Epstein Billionaire's files. In part 1, we exposed the architect. Now, we dismantle the machine. Ghislaine Maxwell was not just a participant in Jeffrey Epstein's crimes. She was the CEO of Abuse, the manager who ran the entire operation with ruthless efficiency. As one victim testified in court, she ran the house. She ran the staff. She ran the girls. This was not a haphazard operation. This was a machine, finely tuned and brutally effective. The recruitment pipeline was systematic, a 4-stage process designed to identify and ensnare vulnerable young girls. It started with modeling agencies, where scouts would identify potential victims. They targeted vulnerable neighborhoods, looking for girls from broken homes, girls who were desperate for a way out. The scouts would approach them with false promises of modeling careers, of a better life, of opportunities they could never have imagined. It was a trap, carefully baited and expertly sprung. Once a girl was identified, she entered the vetting process. Maxwell herself would often conduct these interviews, asking probing questions about the girl's family, her financial situation, her dreams and aspirations. As one victim recalled, she asked about my family, my money, my dreams. Maxwell was looking for girls who were isolated, who had no support system, who could be easily controlled. She was looking for the perfect victims. The financial trap was the next stage. Epstein and Maxwell would shower the girls with gifts, paying for their school, their clothes, their living expenses. They created a sense of dependency, a feeling that the girls owed them something. As one victim testified, they paid for my school, my clothes, my life. I felt like I had to do what they wanted. This was not generosity. This was coercion. Isolation tactics were employed to cut the girls off from their support systems. Maxwell would tell them that they couldn't tell anyone about what was happening, that no one would understand, that they would be judged and ostracized. "You can't tell anyone," she would say. "They won't understand." The girls were made to feel ashamed, to feel complicit in their own abuse. They were trapped in a web of secrecy and fear. The surveillance state was another key component of the machine. Epstein's properties were equipped with cameras and recording devices, creating an atmosphere of constant monitoring. As one victim recalled, "I felt eyes on me everywhere. I knew I was being watched." This surveillance served multiple purposes. It was a tool of control, a way to intimidate the victims and ensure their silence. It was also a tool of blackmail, a way to gather compromising material on the powerful men who were Epstein's clients. The enablers were the people who made the machine run smoothly. They were the housekeepers who cleaned up the evidence, the pilots who flew the victims to their abusers, the assistants who scheduled the appointments and managed the logistics. They saw everything and said nothing. As one victim testified, they saw everything and said nothing. They were complicit. These enablers were not innocent bystanders. They were active participants in a criminal enterprise. A day in the life of a victim was a relentless cycle of abuse. From morning to night, they were at the beck and call of Epstein and his clients. As one victim described it, it never stopped. It was a machine. There was no escape, no respite, no hope. The normalization phase was a crucial part of the grooming process. Maxwell would tell the girls that this was how the world worked for people like them, that this was the price of success, that they should be grateful for the opportunities they were being given. "This is how the world works for people like us," she would say. The girls were being conditioned to accept the abuse, to see it as normal, to see themselves as complicit. The trial testimony was devastating. Victim after victim took the stand and described the horrors they had endured. Court transcripts reveal the graphic details of the abuse, the manipulation, the betrayal. One victim, testifying under oath, said, "I was 14. She was 30. The age difference, the power imbalance, the sheer audacity of the crime was laid bare for all to see." One victim described the abuse in harrowing detail. "There were hands everywhere," she said. I felt like a toy being passed around. These were not isolated incidents. This was a pattern of systematic abuse, orchestrated by Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein. Victim number 1, known as Jane, described Maxwell as a godmother figure. She was like a mother to me, Jane testified, then she betrayed me. Maxwell had cultivated a relationship of trust with Jane, only to exploit and abuse her. The betrayal was profound, the trauma lasting. Victim number 2, Annie Farmer, testified about the Zorro Ranch incident. She reported the abuse to the police, but her complaint was ignored. The police report was marked ignored, a damning indictment of the system's failure to protect vulnerable victims. Victim number 3, Carolyn, was targeted for her vulnerability. Maxwell knew that Carolyn had nowhere else to go, that she was desperate for help and support. She knew I had nowhere else to go, Carolyn testified. Maxwell exploited that vulnerability, using it to trap Carolyn in a cycle of abuse. Victim number 4, Kate, fell into the modeling trap. She was lured with promises of a modeling career, only to find herself in a horrific situation. It wasn't a casting call, Kate testified. It was a setup. The open secret was that Epstein and Maxwell were not hiding their crimes. They were operating in plain sight, attending social events, rubbing shoulders with the rich and famous. As one investigator noted, he wasn't trying to hide it. It was an open secret. The powerful men who were part of Epstein's circle knew what was happening, and they chose to look the other way. The pyramid scheme was another insidious aspect of the machine. Victims were encouraged to recruit other victims, with the promise of financial rewards. Bring a friend and you get a bonus, Maxwell would tell them. This turned the victims into unwitting accomplices, further trapping them in the web of abuse. The spoiled brat defense was the strategy employed by Maxwell's lawyers. They tried to blame the victims, suggesting that they were motivated by money, that they were spoiled brats who were exaggerating their claims. They did it for money, the lawyers argued. This was a cruel and cynical attempt to discredit the victims and deflect responsibility from Maxwell. The emotional toll on the victims has been immense. Many suffer from PTSD, trauma, and ruined lives. I still have nightmares, one victim said. The abuse has left deep scars, both physical and psychological. The 2008 sweetheart deal was the original sin, the moment when justice was denied. Epstein was given a non-prosecution agreement that protected him and his co-conspirators from federal charges. This deal was a travesty of justice, a corrupt bargain that allowed Epstein to continue his crimes for another decade. The unnamed co-conspirators were the people who were protected by the 2008 deal. Their names were redacted from the indictment, shielding them from prosecution. Who else was protected? The question remains unanswered, a testament to the power and influence of Epstein's network. The FBI failure is another dark chapter in this story. The FBI had evidence of Epstein's crimes as early as 2006, but they failed to act. We had the evidence in 2006, one former FBI agent admitted. Why didn't they act sooner? The question haunts the investigation. The media blackout was another factor that allowed Epstein and Maxwell to operate with impunity. For years, the media ignored the story, burying it in the back pages. Nobody wanted to touch it, one journalist said. The media's failure to investigate and report on Epstein's crimes was a betrayal of their responsibility to the public. The Acosta connection is one of the most explosive revelations. Alexander Acosta, the prosecutor who negotiated the 2008 sweetheart deal, later said, "I was told Epstein belonged to intelligence." This statement raises disturbing questions about the role of intelligence agencies in protecting Epstein. The Virginia Giuffre settlement was another attempt to buy silence. Epstein and Maxwell paid millions of dollars to settle lawsuits brought by victims, including Virginia Giuffre. They paid millions to make it go away, one lawyer said. These settlements were not acts of contrition. They were attempts to silence the victims and avoid accountability. The lost evidence is a major obstacle to justice. tapes, hard drives, and other evidence have gone missing, making it difficult to fully investigate the extent of Epstein's crimes. Where are the tapes? Victims and investigators alike have asked. The disappearance of this evidence is deeply suspicious. The prison suicide of Jeffrey Epstein conveniently ended the criminal case against him. His death was ruled a suicide, but many questions remain unanswered. The case was stamped case closed, but for many, the circumstances of Epstein's death are deeply suspicious. The Maxwell arrest finally brought some measure of justice. Ghislaine Maxwell was captured in New Hampshire, where she had been hiding. Her mugshot was a stark image, a reminder that even the powerful can be brought to justice. The defense strategy was to deny, deflect, and delay. Maxwell's lawyers argued that she was a victim too, that she had been manipulated by Epstein. She's a victim too, they claimed. This was a cynical attempt to evade responsibility. The verdict was a moment of vindication for the victims. Ghislaine Maxwell was found guilty on 5 of 6 counts. The court sketch of the verdict reading captured the moment, a testament to the power of truth and the resilience of the victims. The sentencing brought a measure of closure. Ghislaine Maxwell was sentenced to 20 years in prison. She will die in prison, one observer noted. Justice, at long last, had been served. The victim impact statements were powerful and moving. Victims stood before the court and confronted their abuser, telling her that she had not broken them. "You didn't break me," one victim said. These statements were a testament to the strength and resilience of the human spirit. The unanswered questions remain. Who else was involved? Who else should be held accountable? A list of powerful men remains free, their names protected by secrecy and influence. The work is unfinished. The client list is the holy grail of evidence. It contains the names of the powerful men who were Epstein's clients, the men who abused the victims. Release the names, victims, and advocates demand. The fight to release the client list is a fight for transparency and accountability. The system remains. Has anything changed? The machine may be broken, but the system that allowed it to flourish is still in place. The machine is still running, one investigator warned. The fight for justice is far from over. The call to action is clear. We must demand accountability. We must not let them get away with it. Don't let them get away with it, one victim pleaded. The fight for justice requires vigilance, courage, and a commitment to truth. In the next episode, Part 3, The Leverage, we will explore the blackmail operation that was at the heart of Epstein and Maxwell's power. She holds the keys to the kingdom, one source said. The story is far from over. This investigation was conducted by a team dedicated to uncovering the truth. Truth at all costs is our motto. We will not rest until justice is served. The final image is of Ghislaine Maxwell behind bars. The architect. The machine. The prisoner. The end of one chapter, but the fight for justice continues. Let us delve deeper into the mechanics of this machine, into the dark heart of this criminal enterprise. The recruitment pipeline was not a random process. It was a carefully designed system, honed over years of practice. Maxwell and Epstein understood the psychology of vulnerability. They knew how to identify girls who were desperate, who were isolated, who were looking for a way out. They knew how to exploit that desperation, to turn it into a weapon against the victims themselves. The modeling agencies were the perfect hunting ground. Young girls, dreaming of fame and fortune, were easy targets. The scouts would approach them with promises of photo shoots, of runway shows, of a glamorous life. But the reality was far different. The photo shoots were not for legitimate modeling agencies. They were for Epstein's personal collection. The runway shows were not in Paris or Milan. They were in Epstein's private residences, where the girls were paraded before his wealthy clients. The vulnerable neighborhoods were another source of victims. Maxwell and Epstein targeted girls from broken homes, girls who were in foster care, girls who were living on the streets. These girls had no support system, no one to protect them, no one to turn to for help. They were the perfect victims, invisible and disposable. The false promises were the bait that lured the girls into the trap. They were promised money, education, opportunities. They were told that they would be taken care of, that they would be safe. But these were lies, carefully crafted to manipulate and control. The vetting process was designed to identify the most vulnerable girls, the ones who could be most easily controlled. Maxwell would ask probing questions, designed to assess the girl's level of desperation, her level of isolation, her level of need. She was looking for girls who had no one to turn to, girls who would be grateful for any attention, any support, any help. The financial trap was a form of debt bondage. By paying for the girls' expenses, Epstein and Maxwell created a sense of obligation, a feeling that the girls owed them something. This debt was then used to coerce the girls into performing sexual acts. The girls felt trapped, unable to escape without losing the financial support they had come to depend on. The isolation tactics were designed to cut the girls off from any potential source of help or support. Maxwell would tell the girls that they couldn't tell their families, their friends, their teachers. She would tell them that no one would believe them, that they would be judged and ostracized. This isolation made the girls even more vulnerable, even more dependent on Epstein and Maxwell. The surveillance state was a tool of control and intimidation. The girls knew they were being watched, and that knowledge was a powerful deterrent against any attempt to escape or to seek help. The cameras and recording devices were also used to gather blackmail material, both on the girls themselves and on the powerful men who were Epstein's clients. The enablers were the people who made the machine run smoothly. They were the ones who booked the flights, who cleaned the rooms, who managed the schedules. They were the ones who saw the girls coming and going, who saw the bruises and the tears, who heard the cries for help. And they did nothing. They chose to look the other way, to prioritize their own jobs and their own livelihoods over the safety and well-being of the victims. The relentless cycle of abuse was designed to break the girls' spirits, to make them compliant and submissive. From morning to night, they were at the beck and call of Epstein and his clients. There was no escape, no respite, no hope. The machine was designed to grind them down, to turn them into objects, to rob them of their humanity. The normalization phase was a form of psychological manipulation. By telling the girls that this was how the world worked, that this was the price of success, Maxwell was trying to make them complicit in their own abuse. She was trying to make them believe that they were not victims, but willing participants. This was a cruel and cynical tactic, designed to silence the girls and to protect Epstein and Maxwell from prosecution. The trial testimony was a moment of truth. For the first time, the victims were able to tell their stories in a court of law, under oath, with the weight of the legal system behind them. Their testimony was devastating, a powerful indictment of Ghislaine Maxwell and the machine she had built. The graphic accounts of abuse were difficult to hear, but they were necessary. They laid bare the reality of what had happened, the horrors that the victims had endured. These were not abstract crimes. These were real acts of violence and exploitation, committed against real people. The victim impact statements were a powerful reminder of the human cost of Epstein and Maxwell's crimes. These were not just legal proceedings. These were real people, whose lives had been shattered by the abuse they had suffered. Their voices, their stories, their pain, were a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit. The fight for justice is far from over. The client list remains hidden. The enablers remain free. The system that allowed this to happen remains in place. But the victims have shown us the way forward. They have shown us that it is possible to speak truth to power, to demand accountability, to fight for justice. And we must follow their lead. The machine that Ghislaine Maxwell built was not just a criminal enterprise. It was a symbol of everything that is wrong with our society, a testament to the corrupting influence of wealth and power. It was a machine that preyed on the vulnerable, that exploited the innocent, that destroyed lives. And it was a machine that was protected by a system that values money and status above all else. The 2008 sweetheart deal was not just a legal failure. It was a moral failure, a betrayal of the victims and a betrayal of justice. The non-prosecution agreement that was negotiated by Alexander Acosta gave Epstein immunity from federal prosecution, and it also protected his unnamed co-conspirators. This deal was a gift to Epstein and his enablers, a get-out-of-jail-free card that allowed them to continue their crimes for another decade. The unnamed co-conspirators are the ghosts that haunt this case. Who were they? What did they do? Why were they protected? These questions remain unanswered, and the redacted names on the indictment are a stark reminder of the power and influence that Epstein wielded. The victims deserve to know who else was involved, who else should be held accountable. The public deserves to know the truth. The FBI's failure to act is another dark chapter in this story. The FBI had evidence of Epstein's crimes as early as 2006, but they failed to pursue the case aggressively. They failed to protect the victims, and they failed to bring Epstein to justice. Why? Was it incompetence? Was it corruption? Was it a deliberate decision to protect a powerful man? We may never know the full truth, but the FBI's failure is a stain on the agency's reputation. The media blackout was another factor that allowed Epstein and Maxwell to operate with impunity. For years, the mainstream media ignored the story, burying it in the back pages or refusing to cover it at all. Why? Was it fear of Epstein's lawyers? Was it a desire to protect powerful people? Was it a lack of interest in the stories of young, vulnerable girls? Whatever the reason, the media's failure to investigate and report on Epstein's crimes was a betrayal of their responsibility to the public. The Acosta connection is one of the most disturbing revelations to emerge from this case. Alexander Acosta, the prosecutor who negotiated the 2008 sweetheart deal, later claimed that he was told that Epstein belonged to intelligence. This statement raises profound questions about the role of intelligence agencies in protecting Epstein. Was Epstein working for the CIA? For the Mossad? For some other intelligence agency? And if so, what was he doing for them? Was he using his blackmail operation to gather intelligence on powerful individuals? These are questions that demand answers. The Virginia Giuffre settlement was another attempt to buy silence and avoid accountability. Epstein and Maxwell paid millions of dollars to settle lawsuits brought by victims, including Virginia Giuffre. These settlements were not acts of contrition or remorse. They were strategic moves, designed to silence the victims and to avoid the public scrutiny that would come with a trial. The settlements were a form of hush money, a way to sweep the crimes under the rug. The lost evidence is a major obstacle to achieving full justice. Tapes, hard drives, and other evidence have gone missing, making it difficult to fully investigate the extent of Epstein's crimes and to identify all of the perpetrators. Where are the tapes? Who took them? Why were they destroyed? These are questions that haunt the investigation. The disappearance of this evidence is deeply suspicious, and it suggests a deliberate effort to cover up the crimes and to protect the guilty. The prison suicide of Jeffrey Epstein was a convenient end to the criminal case against him. His death was ruled a suicide, but many questions remain unanswered. How could Epstein, a high-profile prisoner who was on suicide watch, have been able to kill himself? Why were the cameras in his cell not working? Why were the guards not checking on him? The circumstances of Epstein's death are deeply suspicious, and many people believe that he was murdered to prevent him from testifying and revealing the names of his powerful clients. The Maxwell arrest was a moment of hope for the victims. After years of evading justice, Ghislaine Maxwell was finally captured. She was found hiding in a remote property in New Hampshire, living under an assumed name. Her arrest was a testament to the persistence of the investigators and the courage of the victims who refused to give up. The defense strategy employed by Maxwell's lawyers was predictable and cynical. They denied the allegations, they deflected blame onto Epstein, and they delayed the trial as long as possible. They tried to portray Maxwell as a victim of Epstein's manipulation, as a woman who had been coerced and controlled. This was a transparent attempt to evade responsibility and to garner sympathy from the jury. The verdict was a moment of vindication for the victims. Ghislaine Maxwell was found guilty on 5 of 6 counts, including sex trafficking of minors. The jury had heard the evidence, they had listened to the victims, and they had reached a just verdict. The guilty verdict was a powerful affirmation that the victims had been telling the truth, and that Ghislaine Maxwell was indeed the architect of a global sex trafficking ring. The sentencing brought a measure of closure. Ghislaine Maxwell was sentenced to 20 years in prison, a sentence that ensures she will spend the rest of her life behind bars. The judge, in handing down the sentence, acknowledged the suffering of the victims and the severity of Maxwell's crimes. The sentence was a message that even the powerful can be held accountable for their actions. The victim impact statements were the most powerful moments of the sentencing hearing. Victim after victim stood before the court and confronted Ghislaine Maxwell, telling her that she had not broken them, that they had survived, and that they would continue to fight for justice. These statements were a testament to the strength and resilience of the human spirit, and they were a reminder that the victims are not defined by their abuse, but by their courage and their determination to overcome it. The unanswered questions remain. Who else was involved in Epstein's trafficking ring? Who else should be held accountable? The client list, the holy grail of evidence, remains hidden. The names of the powerful men who abused the victims are still protected by secrecy and influence. The fight to release the client list is a fight for transparency, for accountability, and for justice. The system that allowed Epstein and Maxwell to operate with impunity for so long is still in place. The culture of wealth and privilege that protects the powerful and preys on the vulnerable is still thriving. The machine may be broken, but the blueprint remains. And there will always be someone willing to rebuild it. The call to action is clear. We must demand accountability from those who enabled Epstein and Maxwell. We must demand transparency from the institutions that failed to protect the victims. We must demand justice for all those who have been harmed. And we must never forget what happened, so that we can prevent it from happening again. This is the story of the machine, a criminal enterprise built on the suffering of innocent girls. It is a story of greed, of corruption, of abuse, and of the enduring power of the human spirit. It is a story that will stay with you long after the final credits have rolled. And it is a story that demands action, that demands change, that demands justice.